slowly falling, and my heart is so sore. 6 more miles, I leave my darling, never on this earth to me no more. 6 more miles to the graveyard. 6 more miles, long and sad. 6 more miles, I leave my darling, leave the best friend I ever
On New Year's Eve, 1952, this Cadillac convertible was heading north from Tennessee towards Canton, Ohio. A state trooper stopped the car at one point to give the driver a speeding ticket. When he looked at the passenger in the back of the car, he said, "This man looks dead." He just took some sleeping pills, the driver said. Later, when the driver pulled the car into a gas station in West Virginia, he felt the hand of his passenger. It was cold. Hank Williams Sr., the hillbilly Shakespeare, had died sometime during the night at the age of 29. 40 years after his death, Hank Williams is still considered the king of country music.
He was just tall, lanky, country boy Hank. That was about the way I knew him. The way I remember him was always with his cowboy hats and suits, because that stuck in my mind because I was so young. I just remember all the fancy suits, the big hats, and the boots. I thought that was just great. And I still like Western stuff to this day. But he was just, never met a stranger, I don't think. Never did anybody wrong. He's just a good-natured person.
My mother had a boarding house in Greenville. We went to school in Greenville. And then we moved to Montgomery when Hank was 14. And I was 15.
At this spot here on South Hull, where Hank Williams lived before he went to Shreveport, and from Shreveport on to Nashville, Tennessee. But ladies and gentlemen, if I could bid you farewell from a spot that a house was going to remain, then indeed I would bid you fair adieu this afternoon from this spot on South Hull. We thank you for your interest in Hank Williams. We hope the whole world comes by to see him. And remember, this is where a genius lived.
Hey, good looking, what you got cooking? I'm about cooking something up with me. You think, baby, we could find us a brand new recipe. I got a hot rod poured and a $2 bill, and I know a spot right over the hill. There's soda pop and the dancing free. So if you want to have fun, come along with me. Say, hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up to me? I'm ready, so we can go steady. So how's about saving all your time for me? Ain't no more looking, I know I've been cooking. So how's about keeping steady company? $0.77. I'll be this bill is covered with hay. Cause I'm writing your name down on every page. Say, hey, good looking. What you got cooking? How's about cooking something up to me?
Oh, well, good. Good to see you.
We're doing a documentary on Hank Williams Sr. Would
Great.
you mind telling us a couple of words about him?
Well, I never knew him personally. However, I was in the music business back in, and he was one of the guys that inspired me a lot by his writing and his music, which I think he has everyone, you know. I know his son very well, Hank Jr., great entertainer and a super fella and a good friend of mine.
What do you think made him so special as a songwriter, performer?
Well, I think because he just wrote songs that everybody could understand and songs about different subjects that people could relate to real well. And although a lot of his songs were sad songs, you know, about lost love, like Cheating Heart and Cold, Cold Heart and those, but they were so real and such great melodies. He was just a very gifted writer, I think. Thanks. Good to see you.
Our dad was in the Veterans Hospital, and our mother basically raised us. And we did things to help her make a living. Hank shined shoes. We sold peanuts on the street. He started to play at a very young age. His first experience with music was standing on the organ stand beside my mother in a little church in Alabama, near Mount Olive, Alabama, when he was real, real young. Then there was a black man named Rufus Payne, whose nickname was T-Tot. He and another black man in the evening were strolling musicians. You had a lot of that in the Depression. They would come by in the evening and play and sing and ask for pennies or food. And Hank began to follow T-Tot everywhere he went. And one day T-Tot came to my mother and he said, "I'm afraid that little white boss is going to get in trouble following me. I'm afraid he might get hurt." And my mother told him, "Well, T-Tot, he wants to learn to play. If you will teach him to play the guitar, I will trade you food for that, for doing that, for giving him lessons." And that's the person that taught him to play.
I'm a great admirer of Hank Williams Sr., and this is one of my favorite songs that he does. I know all of his songs, and I admire him because I come from country just like he does, and this is called Moaning the Blues. When my baby died in the blue, then there wasn't nothing I could do except moaning around with my head in my hands, saying, "What am I coming to do?" I just keep moaning, I'm moaning the blues. Well, I wrote her a nice long letter. I said, "Mama, please come home. Hey, your dad is lonesome, and all I do is moan. I promise you, baby, that I'll be good and I'll never be bad no more. I'm sitting here waiting for you right now to walk through that front door, and I'll stop moaning, moaning the blues. Hi, baby, 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 honey, baby, please come home. Hey, your dad is lonesome, and all I do is moan. I've been loving that girl for so long, I can't afford to lose her now. Man, I thought I was right, but I must have been wrong because my head is starting to bow, and now I'm moaning the blues. I wrote a nice long letter, said, "Mama, please come home. Your dad is lonesome, and all I do is moan. I promise you, baby, that I'll be good and I'll never be bad no more. I'm sitting here waiting for you right now to walk through that front door, and I'll stop moaning, I'm moaning the blues."
The kind of movies he liked was dime type things, you know, Western, Ken Maynard, Hoot Gibson, and all those people with the big hats on. And it was at the Tivoli. We called it the Rat Hole. Cost a dime to get in it. And but Miss Williams would give him the money to go. And he wanted a bottle of beer, but she'd watch him and me from the corner, all the way down past the little old hamburger joint. And he'd begin to holler for the beer and throw the money in there, and I'd go on by it, and he would too, till I got around the corner down there, and then I'd come back and get the beer.
My mother's been portrayed in the books that have been written as a very domineering woman who had a very negative influence on Hank's life. Nothing, it's absolutely nothing, is further from the truth. My mother was a very strong woman. Any woman that back in the Depression who had 2 children to raise had to be a strong person. But my mother was a very loving woman, a very kind woman.
One time, up there was him and his mama got up a row at the breakfast table, and I think she hit him, and he hit her back. And she says, "Hank, you hit your mama?" He said, "Mama's hitting her son, ain't she?" You couldn't ever laugh at him. It'd get funny, you know. And it was so, you know, for that. He was grown, sure, I've been beating on him that way. But she did. She slapped him, you know. She was a good old lady.
Well, when Daddy went in the hospital, a lot of people thought he had died, and the rumors were out that he had died. But he had this aneurysm and was paralyzed in his face for like 7 years. But the aneurysm burst, and his memory came back, and he got back all the use of his muscles of his face, and he was fine. And Daddy lived to be almost 80 years old, and his mind was good up until the last day. And people just write all kind of articles like Hank's daddy died when he went in the hospital, or he died later on. Even on Hank's death certificate, it lists his father as deceased. But his father was at his funeral, and so that stirred quite a commotion, because dead people don't show up at their son's funerals, but he was there.
Well, I was singing over the radio, WSFA in Montgomery, and I had a program every morning from 6 to 6:30. I was singing cowboy. I didn't have a cow then, but I was singing about them. I was just a kid, 16, 18 years old, and Hank was living in Greenville, and Miss Williams said that she couldn't get him away from the radio every morning, get him ready to put him on the school bus till I come off the air every morning, 6:30. So when he come to Montgomery, Hank started, we got together, his mother run a boarding house, and she bought some meat from Hormel, and so I got run into Hank at the boarding house there then, and he started going around with me. He was only about 15, 16 years old, going with me and helped me unload the truck. Of course, I didn't pay him anything. I didn't have anything to pay him.
Mr. Dickens?
Yes, sir.
We are doing a documentary on Hank Williams Sr.
Yes, sir.
You know him quite well. Can you tell us something about him?
Well, nothing more than you've probably been told already. I enjoyed the time that I had spent with Hank Williams during the height of his career, and got to know him as a personal friend, and watched the great magnitude that he had, and watched him perform. Appear on the same stage with Hank Williams was a joy for me, and I appreciate that great association that we had as friends.
So he came in and he said, "Are you the group?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I'm Hank Williams, follow me." So we went into a pawn shop around the corner, and Hank asked the guy, "Jake, do you have any more of those blackjacks, those clubs?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Give me 5 of them." So he took them and passed them out to the different ones of us, and he said, "Boys, if you're going to play with me, you're going to need these." And sure enough, he was right. We played those honky-tonks in and around southern Alabama, and sometimes during the latter part of World War II on a Saturday night, that's not the safest place to be. So that was how I met Hank Williams.
Some of the places you were playing, you didn't know which way to go, because there would be people inside shooting out and people outside shooting in. You'd had to figure out which was the safer to be inside or out.
I usually tried to find a big upright piano and get behind that. I felt that was the safest place to be.
Well, Hank Williams, Sr., well, we worked a lot together. We traveled a lot together on the road, and he was a wonderful man. He really had some fine songs, and he wrote one song with Bill Monroe and Hank Williams. I'm Blue, I'm Lonesome Too. Glad to have you folks over here. You enjoying everything?
Yeah, very much so.
That's fine.
Enjoyed
That's
the show.
fine. I'd like to come over to your country sometime.
He pulled off his hat. He always wore a hat. He pulled off his hat. He says, look at this hat. He said, look at them scars. He says, people say Hank Williams is getting bald-headed. He says, hell, I ain't getting bald-headed. He said, it's these dang axe chops on my head. He says, look at that. Look at that scar there. Look. So naturally, when he wanted to do something, you did it. So I looked at the scars, and he did have a whop of them. Saxophone scars, guitar scars. He told me about several other altercations. But you know, the strange thing, one of the very strange things about Hank Williams, he had his mother with him. He said, he told me one time, he said, Bob, in a downright honky-tonk fight, he said, I'd rather have my mama standing behind me with a broke bottle than anybody I know of. He says, when I get in a fight, he says, I call for mama. And he says, you know, she's the best one in the world. But he said she would take the money.
Well, he was my favorite. That's what got me interested in writing songs back when I was just a kid. I got listening to Eddie Arnold and Hank Williams, and he used to write poems. You got a good poem and put a tune to it, you got a song, you know. So that's how I started writing.
Hank got a little under the weather with his booze, and he laid in the car, and we started. Ed could sing. And he was just singing along there and playing, and I was playing steel guitar. And he come staggering in the back door with his guitar. And one of them old country boys out there said, oh, go on back and lay down, you drunk. He said, they're doing all right. Old open window to the schoolhouse. He said, I'll see you after the show, young man. And all of a sudden, the guy's going to get up anyhow, big old country boy, and he laid that guitar across his head, because he would do that. You know, and then had to borrow somebody else's to finish the little school show with, which was 25 cents a person. You know, to get in, what of them wasn't in was hanging in the window. But that was funny to me. I hated to see a good Gibson guitar busted wide open, but it was good to see that guy's head cracked open too, I reckon.
I think it's a cross between the temperament that you have to want to write songs in the first place, is the kind of temperament that might lead you into those dark areas. You know, I mean, it comes together like that more than not. All through history. I mean, Vincent van Gogh, Edgar Allan Poe, you know. It's been that way since Plato, I suppose. I mean, anybody with the temperament to become an artist of some kind generally has the kind of temperament that can be violent mood swings, elated, depressed, you know.
Well, the news is out all over town. You've been seen out running around. I know that I should leave, but then I just can't go. You win again. This heart of mine could never see what everybody knew but me. Just trusting you was my great sin. What can I do? You win again.
Well, I'm sorry for your victim now. Well, soon his head, like mine, will bow. He'll give his heart, oh, but all in vain. Some day say you win again, or you have no heart, you have no shame. You take true love and give the blame. Well, I know that I should not complain. I love you still, you win again. I love you still, you win again. Thanks, Hank.